This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs. Sony is ripping people off again. This is one of the comments that I got in my latest A12 video that I want to respond to because I think a lot of you guys got some good points, but a lot of you guys are missing the mark here. Thanksgiving break means bring your kid to work day. I'm gonna put her to work here. She's gonna read off the comments and I'm going to respond to them. So I screenshot maybe like 5 to 7 comments. And also I'm gonna tell you my experience. Adriana, hello.
Hi.
And I wanna tell you my experience with the A12. I shot the Jets game with this camera. I'm gonna like talk about what actually made a difference in the real world when comparing the A12 to the A1 in my experience with it, all right?
Sony ripping people off once again.
No one's forcing you to buy the camera. No one's putting a gun to you. You have to buy the camera. So that's silly. What's number 2?
Everything new in this camera can be achieved via firmware.
Let's not get carried away. Yes, I do agree that Sony has a firmware issue, and that's a fact. The new features being put into the newer cameras, less expensive cameras, okay, and not being put into the more expensive ones in a firmware update is a problem. There is no reason why a Sony A1, this was their $6,500 flagship camera up until like last week, shouldn't have features that a sub $2,000 camera has, right? Now, with that said, I'm not a hardware engineer or a software engineer. I can only offer my opinion on this. And things like Animal IAF, there's no reason why that shouldn't be in the A1. Things like LUT import, to name a few, I think that those could be put into the A1. I assume things like pre-capture heavily relies on hardware, right? So the A1 does have a fast readout speed, but it requires more processing power. And the A12 has that extra chip, right? Also, things like the 4-way screen, improved ergonomics, obviously those can be put in via firmware. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but either the Z9 or the Z8 ended up getting that pre-shoot firmware update, right? And someone mentioned this I seen it somewhere. So they use that as a point. I think Olympus is the only camera to ever update a camera with a pre-shoot. But remember, that's a Micro Four Thirds camera. The Nikon Z8, Z9 have the same hardware built into the camera, so essentially they can update it with the firmware. I don't think that's something they could do with the A1 because this is a raw output with pre-capture. The Nikons are outputting JPEG files, so it's a lot less strenuous on the camera.
Nikon Z8, way better camera in every aspect for less money. 8K 60p, raw video options, no mechanical shutter, 4K oversample from 8K to 4K, 120p with no crop header, grip and ergonomic, better buffer and
ET, etc.
ETC.
Yeah, okay. I think anyone can make a strong argument that the Z8 is the better value. It is more capable in a lot of ways than the A1 and even the A12. But let's be real though. In regards to what you said, video, I give it to you. Yes, it has more capability in video all around. Buffer, it has a better buffer. At 20 frames per second, yes, it does. In compressed RAW compared to the Sony at 20 frames per second compressed RAW, definitely. The grip and ergonomics, this one is subjective to the person. Now, the one that I can agree with is the mechanical shutter. I love the fact that my A1 has a mechanical shutter. The A1 has the 1/400 flash sync speed, and I wouldn't be able to get that if I didn't have that mechanical shutter in the A1. And I think specifically the A1 has one of the best mechanical shutter mechanisms out there. Plus, it sounds really good too. With the Z9 and Z8, it's great that it's an all electronic. Actually, it's not all great because there have been times when I'm shooting flash with the Z8 or the Z9. Actually, it was the Z9, and I started to get banding in my photos using high-speed sync, which I didn't know what was going on, but it happened. Oh, crap. Now, I think that these kind of topics where we're comparing the specs from two camera systems can get kind of tedious and just, I don't know, it can lead to nowhere, right? So I can sit here and I can argue that the A12 has better autofocus. You know, it can shoot 30 frames per second in RAW instead of 20. Shutter mechanism, and so on and so forth, right? So I guess it just all depends on what you need out of a camera. But at the end of the day, the Z8 undeniably is the better bang for buck, no matter how you look at it. From whatever direction you're looking at, the Z8, Z9 are providing insane value for money that I don't think anybody can compete with, to be honest. All right, what's the next one?
Who say people complain about R52 when released? Haha, it's a new sensor. New AF algorithm, new eye control, the EVF. Unlike this Sony toy, haha.
That's actually funny because I was there for the R52 launch, and the moment that camera went live and people started complaining right away. I mean, the headlines, the articles were saying that the R52 has worse dynamic range, and it was just an overall lackluster of improvement. So it's interesting that I'm interested that you did comment that, first off, yes, it has a new sensor. Technically, and I did a very in-depth test between the R5 and R52. I did a whole video on it. The sensor overall is a little bit better in terms of image quality. You are losing a tiny, tiny bit of dynamic range on the R52, but overall, I think that it is an improvement, or if anything, is just as good as the R5 sensor, that sensor was amazing, by the way. I'm surprised they didn't reuse it, but now you're able to shoot 30 frames per second in RAW, and you don't get any kind of distortion. So, and the eye-controlled AF, yes, I give you that. It works really well for me when I put my eye up to this. I know it doesn't work for everybody. R52 is definitely one of, again, just like the Z8, Z9, this is like a standard. It creates a standard. And it really makes it hard to justify that price on the A12 in 2024, to be honest. And also, you say that the R52 has a new AF algorithm. Well, the same thing happened with the the A12. You got the autofocus bump, got the ergonomic bump, you got the 4-way screen, which is even a pretty big deal for most people. So that's all I got to say about that. What's the next one?
Yet another lackluster release from a greedy company that continues to put in repackaged, rehoused old tech. Further alienating customers as an
A7S III and A1 owner.
And A1 owner. I'll never buy another Sony camera ever again.
All right, I think that every manufacturer is guilty of doing this in some way. What has happened right now, tech has plateaued, and we notice with all the manufacturers, they're trickling down the tech into cheaper cameras, stacked sensors, and technology is getting cheaper, and they were just refining the cameras all together. This is happening all the way around, and everyone's doing it a little bit differently. I think that my biggest complaint with Sony is, like I said, what I said earlier, is how they're putting newer features. They're putting the new features into the newer cameras and not updating their more expensive cameras. There's no reason. These cameras are not directly competing, so they should have those new features as well.
Canon R5 MK2 is not a stacked sensor, right? Seems like a stacked sensors cost $2K extra.
So, this is the interesting thing. The Canon R5 Mark II is a partially stacked sensor. Now, looking at the Z8, Z9, those have a fully stacked sensor, and they are around the same price as the R5 Mark II. Now, the R5 Mark II doesn't have the burst rate of the A1 II. You can shoot up to maybe like 93 raw photos, where the A1 can shoot 150. I still think that just doesn't really justify the price. I think the Nikon's having a fully stacked sensor, and the R5 Mark II having a partially stacked at under $5,000 at this point, that's why I'm saying it makes it harder for the A1 II to be priced at $6,500, personally.
30% improvement compared to A7 IV, which means 70%. Still 7 IV is better.
Heart A7 IV. This is so ridiculous. This is the goals. I see a lot of these comments where people just want to justify their purchase or just feel better about their camera. Look, your A7 IV is great. Okay, the A7 IV is one of the best hybrid cameras and best values for the money. That camera's not going anywhere. You don't have to try to justify your camera. You don't got to try to justify it. Okay, the next part is going to be very long and very boring. I think I'm going to do it at home, the next part. But thank you for reading out the comments for me, though. I got to show some love to today's sponsor, Squarespace. Now, if you've been looking to start a website, blog, or even an online store, what are you waiting for? It's about that time. With Squarespace, you can secure your own custom domain, and then you can create a professional-looking website quickly and easily. And when I say that, that's one of the best parts about it. You need zero skills when it comes to coding and graphic design. One of the newest and coolest features It's called Design Intelligence, which now it helps you design your site that's unique to you using AI technology. Follow that with the SEO feature that Squarespace offers. You're gonna have an easily searchable, high-performing website. And if you wanna, let's say, start a side hustle, you can start an online store like I did and make passive income while you sleep. Don't forget, if you use the code Manny, you will get 10% off your first purchase. The time is now. The link is below. Now let's talk about using the A1 II in the real world and how doesn't get any more real than shooting a professional football game. Now, the first 3 weeks that I had this camera, I had nothing to shoot. The Cubs game, the MLB season was over. And I'm not gonna go shoot portraits with this camera. It doesn't prove anything at the end of the day when we're talking about, the A1 II. Now, thanks to Sony, I was able to shoot the Jets game, or actually just a quarter of the Jets game. But I did learn some things about this camera, and then some things weren't a surprise. So in the real world, I can tell you that yes, the autofocus is better on the A1 II. But when shooting football specifically, because there's so many people on the field, I didn't rely on the autofocus to choose my subject for me. And I can't leave it in wide because there's too many people. So I'm shooting mostly center point or using the custom AF box, the most narrow one where, I'm going to keep where the action is. I'm keeping that in the center. There's too many people. I cannot let the autofocus make decisions for me here. So in that respect, in terms of autofocus, yes, the autofocus is better on this A1 II. But for football specifically, I use mostly center point. So I would get pretty much the exact same hit rate on the A1. I'm pretty sure of it because the A1 is still a very fast focusing camera. It just doesn't have all the subject detections that this one has, all the fancy ones. But I would have gotten the same results with the A1 personally. Now the screen, I only used it for one shot where I shot it from a low angle and I used the screen and I was, I can't do this with the A1. That was nice, but I only used that for one shot. And I think that for other types of photography, something like this is going to be more beneficial. But for football, I didn't really use it that much. The one thing that can or objectively makes a big difference between the A1 and A1 II is having access to pre-capture. See, with football, now that, when I got the rhythm of the game and how to shoot it, I realized that pre-capture it's not really beneficial in football. At least for me, because we know when the action is going to start and stop. We know when the ball is, when the play starts and the play ends. And there's no kind of unpredictability there. So for the most part, I had pre-capture off, but there were times when there's like a high stakes play when it's like a 3rd and long or 3rd down and they're going to pass, there's going to be some action, some dramatic stuff going on. I had pre-capture mapped to C3. I would tap that on, pre-capture's on, and now I had it to half a second. And now I was able to get shots that I objectively could not get with the A1. Like if my finger was not full pressing on the shutter, I would have missed a shot on the A1. And there were some shots that I did get on using the pre-capture that I didn't realize that I was missing out on. And for other types of photography, I think the pre-capture is what's really gonna make a big difference with this camera, or at least that's what I think. Now, the funny thing about this is that there are going to be people saying that, hey, there's, again, this is just a firmware update and all that. But it just all depends on the kind of photographer you are. It all depends on the type of work that you do. Someone may not care about the screen. For someone else, the screen is a lifesaver. Okay, being able to tilt and go this way and go that way, it is in the real world. It plays when trying to get that shot, it makes a big difference. So forget about what everyone else thinks. Forget about that. You got to determine what you think is important for you. Okay. In my case, being an A1 user, shooting football, personally, was it a big deal? Was it a big difference? No, it wasn't a big difference. I feel, again, I could have gotten I could have gotten this. I would have shot the same way, doing most of the same things with the A1 and work around some of some of its limitations, like the screen not being able to rotate. I'd have to just get my lazy butt on the ground and get the shot that way, right? The A1 II has polished up the A1, and I think it's a good thing. I think the price is not, but it's the camera. All the complaints that I've had about this camera were fixed, and for me, truly, for what I need, this camera does everything. This is all I really needed out of the A1 for it to be damn near perfect for me. Pre-capture is a nice bonus, especially now that I'm doing more sports work, and I'm actually headed to a safari, Africa, in 3 days. So I'm taking the A1 II and the A1, both cameras. I suspect that shooting animals with the animal IAF and the animal detect autofocus, it's going to be I'm going to get a lot better results on the A1 II. When I say a lot better, I mean I'm going to get better results, less work on my end to maybe possibly not get the focus right on the animal, because that's one thing that I always struggled with was the animal AF. I shoot my dogs all the time. It always kind of struggled in that area. And for that, I think the A1 II is going to be nice. But anyway, stay tuned for that full video. I plan on shooting both side by side, and report back to you what my findings were. Because I'm going to just keep it real with y'all about this. All right. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you after Africa. I'll probably be 10 pounds lighter.